that there when you get there. Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. I've got a great guest tonight, and I've got a super show lined up for you next week. My next week's guest is Linda Savage. Linda wrote a book called Reclaiming Goddess Sexuality, The Power of the Feminine Way. And she's just a delight, and we're going to have a great show with Linda next week. Be sure and join us, same time, 9 o'clock on Tuesday evening, 9 Eastern Standard Time. My guest tonight, well, before I talk about that, let me talk just a little bit about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network, who brings us our show, Spiritual But Not Religious Show, and why the Spiritual Broadcasting Network exists at all. You know, there's actually a spiritual revolution going on out there. There's a huge amount of transformation in process, personal transformations, and as those personal transformations begin to multiply number-wise, sooner or later we'll have a mass consciousness transformation, which is what we're after, to move out of the darkness and the war and all the disease that we've got going on in our world. There's a huge number of people who are participating in this revolution, and the way we participate is by beginning to change ourselves, to work on our own issues. And by my calculations, it really started to show up in the 30s, the 1930s, as far as the revolution itself. There are people who will tell you it was sooner than that, but it started to really get a foothold. And the purpose of the Spiritual Broadcasting Network is to bring you the voices of that movement. It's a leaderless movement. It's diverse. It has every kind of spiritual belief that you can think of. And we really need to celebrate our own diversity. The diversity is not a bad thing. It's a good thing for us. So that's the whole purpose of Spiritual Broadcasting Network, is to bring you those voices of those people who are conscious, awake, and really working towards this transformation that the globe is trying to experience. My guest tonight is Tom's up. Tell me I'm out of the picture here. Elfrida Pretorius. Elfrida's written a book called Stop Struggling and Start Living. One of the things that a couple of things. It's a really good read. I enjoyed it. She writes in the style of Dan Millman, who, you know, it's actually a fiction book rather than wading through a nonfiction book that has, you know, and if you remember, Dan Millman's work was A Way of the Peaceful Warrior. But there's another thing that I think is really essential. If you're at all like me, and I've read a lot of books, and when you read them, you think, wow, this is fantastic, and you look for the change that it tries to tell you is going to come up about for you. But more often than not, there's no real change happens in your life unless you do some work. Well, Elfrida has written a companion workbook called The 10 Truths from the Top of Table Mountain. And boy, I can't tell you how important it is to if you find something that you really find that you get your heart's there, stay with it and do the work. I'm gonna push our guest on here shortly. We've had I think Mercury has been in retrograde, from what I understand. And it has shown up in our life, that's for sure, especially tonight. Do you know if it's out of
something?
Man, I'm telling. But right down, we had everything set and everything's ready to go, and then right down to the last minute, we've had some problems. So have we got Elfrida ready to come on the line, Tom?
Yes, we do.
All right, let me get her audio, and then I will push her on the air. And Elfrida, are you there with me?
Yes, I am.
Good evening. It is really a pleasure to see you again. It's been a while. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Are you getting a delay, I wonder?
Yes, I am getting a delay. Yes.
Okay, we'll just have to work with that. I think that's because you're hooked in through your computer, the thing that Tom was trying to work with you. So I will be aware that we have that time delay, and I hope our audience will forgive us. But uh, Elfrida's up in Canada, and she's coming to us via Skype. And sometimes that works great, and sometimes we have a bit of a problem with it. So Victoria, what am I? Where am I at? Elfrida, what's been going on for you since our last talk? You have your own radio show. You do you do workshops. You're a very busy lady.
Yes. Well, since you and I have talked, I've been doing a fair deal of public speaking. I go into corporate offices and I talk about the book. Um, I've also actually started writing my own autobiography, and once again, I'm telling a story.
Uh huh.
Storytelling is what I do best. It is the style that I prefer to work with. And so I started doing that. And in the meantime, Mike and I are promoting The Meadow, which is the book that I was on the show with him the last time. So yeah, it's a really busy time.
So things are going really well for you. I know. I think after a while we do all this work. Sooner or later, it begins to pay off for us. And You know, on your radio show, let's give a plug for that. Tell us where and people can go to hear you, and what time of day and what day it's on.
Right. George, at the moment, the radio show is actually on hiatus at the moment
Okay.
because um, that was because we were busy writing The Meadow and, seeing it through the publishing process and working with that. And, I just found that it just became too much to do that. But the radio show was called Game Changer. It's probably going to go back on air. Um, and it is really based around the topic of my first book, which is the one that we are discussing tonight,
Right.
which is Stop Struggling and Start Living. And the whole premise of the show, I mean, I chose um, the title Game Changer because I believe that we all have to change our games in life. To see a difference, to impact our own lives, we have to learn how to change our games.
As a matter of
And
fact,
I
that's a big part of this book. Is life is a game. What kind of a game do you? What do you think? What kind of game are we playing?
Well, I mean, the book is titled "Stop Struggling and Start Living: The Rules of the Game."
Right.
And so, what I did is I used the analogy of a game, and I compare life to a game. And I don't mean by that it's a lighthearted process or something that is not supposed to be taken seriously. Quite the contrary. But I use the analogy of a game because really, if you think about games in life, let's take a soccer game or a hockey game, which here in Canada is like a religion, hockey.
Absolutely. Well, it is in Detroit too, where I'm from. So.
Yeah. So, if you break the rule, any of the rules in the game, they send you to the sideline. You go sit in the sin bin and you don't play.
Right.
And, if you think about it a little bit differently, for those of us who have children who have played in sports, it's not fun to watch anybody sit on the sideline. And so I use that analogy of a game because, in my view, so many people are actually not participating fully in the game of life just because they're doing a number of things wrong, which takes them out of the game. And so if they don't understand what the rules of the game is, because this game that we call life certainly has some rules, and if you
Absolutely.
don't understand what those rules are, then you go through your life sulking, feeling sorry for yourself. You're a victim. You complain, you blame, and you're always trying to find the culprit who did it to you instead of learning how to go within and find out, why am I not fully engaged in the game of life?
Well, I think you talk about the difference between being physically awake and being conscious. And excuse me, it seems to me that both of those places have different rules. The rules when I'm just physically awake are one set of rules, but once I started to become really conscious, there was a whole new set of rules and I think the game is a great metaphor for it. I believe that's exactly what we're doing. And so when you talk about being physically awake and conscious, tell us what you mean by that.
Okay, my journey started a very, very long time ago in my life, and I very quickly figured out that there is a difference between intelligence and consciousness. Um,
What
for sure.
Afraid of what was it that brought you to that point where you could even consider that? I talk with so many people that it's pain that causes us to stop for a minute where we're at and have to take a good strong look. Was there some event in your life that kind of turned you?
Um, I, I- yes, there's a number of things that happen, but your show is called Spiritual but Not Religious,
Yes.
and I grew up in a very religious environment. I was raised in South Africa, and so I went to church 3 times on a Sunday. I went to Sunday school in the morning, and then I had to go to the morning service, and then I had to go to the evening service.
Right.
And so, I was really given an overdose of religion. Now, a number of things happened in my life, which I don't think we should talk about in this show. That converted me, not converted is the wrong way, but changed me from being just a person who participates in life to beginning to observe um, the walk and the talk of people.
Oh, for
So when
sure.
I was a little girl, around about 6 years old, I started looking at people's behavior and matching what was coming out of their mouths with their behaviors. And if those two didn't match, I knew that there was a problem. And so, I will never forget. I'll tell you a true story that I was, in my Sunday school class one day, and I was about 7 years old, and we were waiting for our teacher, and she didn't come, and so I got up and I walked to the door and I peeked around the door and looked down the corridor to see where she was, and then I saw her around the corner. She was kissing the guy who was teaching the class next door to us.
Oh, wow.
Now you might say, well, what's that? Why is that your business? Well, wasn't any of my business, except that guy was our neighbor, and I knew that he wasn't married to this woman. So I walked back into the class and I sat down and I thought about that, and then she came back into the class and she started teaching us the 10 Commandments.
Huh.
And so when she got to the part about that you you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, I put my hand up and I asked her if Sunday school teachers are exempt from that rule.
Oh, wow. How old were you?
And
How old were you at this time?
7.
Wow.
So she made me. I was 7, and so she made me sit detention for 2 Sundays, and I was very privileged in the fact that I had a wonderful father who allowed me to ask many, many questions, and so I just my whole life had a problem with hypocrisy. I looked around me everywhere in the churches. I saw hypocrisy, and I wanted to see honesty. So I started investigating a lot of stuff when I was in my late teens, and I did a comparative study of all the mainstream religions, and so that's really where my journey started. And it was precipitated by the fact that I looked around me, George, and I looked at people in the world, and I thought to myself, okay, so where are the happy people?
Right.
Why do I not see the happy people?
Everybody's
And
struggling.
everybody is struggling. And so I needed to figure out, I wanted to figure out, how do you create a life in which you can be truly happy, because I knew something fundamentally I suspected at a young age, and then when I became older, I confirmed it. And that is that you create your own reality, you make your life happen, and that's when I figured out that there are rules to this game of life.
And you know that point that you're bringing out now is such a major difficulty for most people, especially people who haven't started awakening yet, and that is the idea that we really are responsible for everything that goes on in our life. That's a very hard thing for some people to be able to swallow that idea. You know, that's like no, I can't be. So in the book you talk about blame, and it's a really huge part. You want to give us an idea of what part blame plays in keeping us stuck?
Right. Let me just give you some background to our listeners that, I created a fictional character to tell the story.
Yes.
By the name of Sam. And, Sam doesn't take any responsibility for his life, really. He's upset about a lot of things. A lot of things have happened in his life that is really upsetting and makes his life very difficult. But he's incapable of seeing why this is all he's making and he's doing. And the reason why that is so is because from a very young age, you have to remember that children don't do what you say. They do what you do. Children learn through examples, right?
Yeah, well, you know what, Elfrida? I grew up in a home where my mother used to say to me when I would question her, "Don't do as I do as I say." And that was that. I can't tell you how often I heard that. So I'm with you on this. I totally understand this.
Yeah. Well, the truth around that is that is the reason why we have the two camps between people who are conscious and people who are not conscious.
Right.
And sometimes when I talk to people about well, you know what, you are awake but you're not aware, they become offended because they take things like that personally.
Absolutely.
But the reason for that, George, is because we are such highly conditioned beings. We learn things through conditioning. In fact, the process through which we learn anything is called spaced repetition.
Right.
So, we are really what is called highly sophisticated robots. Because
Absolutely.
we can do everything on cue. You get out of bed in the morning, you go through your routine of bathroom, brushing teeth, coffee, breakfast, in the car, off to work, and so on and so on. So you don't need any real conscious thoughts to do any of those things. So when you say to somebody, but that doesn't mean that you are really aware. It just means that you what it really means is that you're not in the present moment. Present moment awareness is what makes the difference. Those are the people who learn to become fully conscious and learn how to take responsibility for their actions, and they also learn how to become, and here's a really key thing, response able. So, back to your question, why do people blame? They blame because it's easy. They've been taught to do that. And, it is in the nature of the human being, when something goes well, and somebody says, gee, who did that? That's really wonderful. We raise our hands. We say,
right.
Oh, I did that. But if something goes wrong and the question is, well, who caused that? Then we all look over our shoulder to find the culprit who's responsible for this dilemma that we don't want to be in. But, you talk about spirituality and about religion and the difference between the two.
Yes.
I wrote this book because I wanted people to understand the journey that we have to make is to go within.
Totally.
And it's all the advanced cultures and religions in this world, in fact, confirm this. They all say they have one thing in common, two words, know thyself.
Right.
Know thyself. And until you really develop sufficient self-knowledge about who you are, why you behave the way that you do in certain circumstances, why you say the things that you say, why do you feel wounded, why do you feel sorry for yourself, and on and on and on, there's no talk about personal growth.
Well,
Because personal growth is personal growth because you have to do it.
well, the problem with that, as I found with most people, Elfrida, is that in order to really know myself, we have to look at our dark side, that part of us that we've been in denial about, that we don't want to own. We're hiding it from you. We certainly don't want you to see it. And getting past that sometimes I think it takes one of two things. It takes some kind of a shock, pain, to make us be willing to make a change, or a tremendous desire to know God. But how many times have we read a book where the journey takes us, to the Himalayas or to South America, only to find that exactly what you just said is wherever they stand, they have to go to this inward journey.
Yeah.
So, was there some on your path? Did you have some kind of a mentor or a teacher, or how did you come by this knowledge that you have that you needed to go within and got you started on this? Was it an organized religion, or?
Oh no, it was anything but organized religion.
Yes, anything but.
No, it definitely was an organized religion. I mean that.
Right.
I walked away from that when I was in my very early 20s because I saw the shortcomings of it.
Right.
But I didn't do that because I wanted to be a rebel. I did that because it didn't answer my needs. And so what I did is like I said, I studied all the other mainstream religions, and I was constantly looking. I will never forget that when I was quite a bit younger, the first book that I read that suggested that, God is inside me.
Right.
At that point, I think I was 17 at that point. At that point, the book was so blasphemous to me that I actually walked to a bridge and I threw it over the railing. I mean, I thought to myself, what a blasphemous book. But, that was my conditioning talking, right? Because
yeah, absolutely.
That was definitely my religious conditioning talking.
And unfortunately, it's fear that, that has kept us and still keeps so many people tied to the old ideas, to the old ways. Just like you're talking about, you called it blasphemy, but it's the fear of that.
Yes.
Let
me say this about that, George. There's two things that keeps the human being small.
Right.
The one thing is, if you take the God concept, however you think about it, if you remove the God concept from the human being and put it out there somewhere, in heaven, in nirvana, I don't care what name you give to it.
Right.
The moment you do that, you completely incapacitate the human being. You take his power away.
Circumvents the whole process.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's what organized religion does, right?
Right.
Organized religion, what they do is they tell you need a medium now to reach this power. That could be a preacher, a rabbi, an imam, a guru in our world today. I don't believe that you need a guru. I don't think you need a teacher. You are your own teacher. And until you learn how to go within and discover that power, you will always be dependent on other people to tell you this way, that way, this way. And, that to me is the secret. That's why I wrote the book. And that is Sam's discovery throughout the whole thing is, how do I arrive at that place of internal power where I feel together, intact? And, the key thing about that is, George, you cannot truly care for your fellow human being and love your fellow human being if you don't love yourself.
Oh, it's impossible.
You cannot care
No.
for the world if you don't understand the people.
Right.
And 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 ultimately, you cannot possibly know who the God power is, whatever name you want to give it, him, he, or she. You cannot possibly know that power unless you first know who you are. You have to know who you are, and then you can do that.
And at that point, it's about coming to understand the power that is available to us, and then beginning to learn it rightly. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. From my experience with this, Alfreda, is this whole journey really is about power, because it takes a power to be able to. The book you threw over the bridge, blasphemous. It took power on your part to be able to take some of those ideas and walk away from some of your old conditioning.
Yes, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of conviction, but it also takes a lot of knowing.
Right.
Because when I did that, um, the people, my family in South Africa, uh, didn't want to have anything to do with me because
Right.
I was breaking tradition, and I was moving away from the church. And the moment that you do something that is not in line with what everybody else does, then there's a big question mark after your name and your persona. And that's the reason why. I mean, the key thing about this book, why I wrote this book, I wanted to share my knowledge, my experience with people, and I wanted them to know that you have to do your own investigation. You have to learn how to think for yourself. And in order to do that effectively, you have to learn how to ask the right questions.
Yes.
And I want to say this. It's in the book, so I'm going to say it anyway. There's only two groups of human beings on our planet, and they are the sheeple and the people.
Absolutely, no
And
question.
the sheeple do what they're told. They watch television, they read newspapers, they, their opinion is the mass opinion. And then when you become an individual, a person, you learn to do your individual thinking, you ask the right questions. And here's the key thing. Here's a really important thing about all of this, George. What this does, when you investigate things for yourself and you find the answers, then you gain what is known as experience.
Right.
And experience cannot be bought, it cannot be sold, it cannot be given away. Because experience is the only thing that allows you to own information.
And I'll tell you what, Alfredo, when I'm learning something from someone else, I quickly discern whether we're talking about their opinion or their experience. And if it's their opinion, I take that very much into account with what I'm hearing. And
Right.
I, like you, have questioned everything my
Right.
whole life.
Yeah.
So here's what there's a right at this place that you're talking about here, where you begin to know, and that is, how do people, in your opinion or in your experience, how do they come to trust that inner knowing, that inner voice, that inner knowing that they come with? Because that's a major block early on, is the coming to trust that. You have any suggestions for people on that?
Yeah. I call that a combination of the higher self and intuition. Because, and we all have that.
Yes.
We all have that ability. But the reason why it doesn't work for most people is that they never trust it.
Right.
And they never learn how to trust it. But to get to a place of knowing, you have to follow your instinct, and you have to just give it a chance the first time. Because once, I'm going to make a really, really bold statement, George. Once you learn how to trust your intuition, 100%, you will never make a mistake again.
I think you're, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think you're absolutely right. Many years ago, I started following my intuitive, my nature, my intuition. It's taken me places that my head would never have taken me, Elfrida. But I'm also at a place in my life where I am living my bliss, and I know that I am doing the thing that I came here to do. I'm living my life on purpose. How could you buy that? I'm sure it must be the same for you.
Yes,
And in,
it is the same for me, and you know what goes with that is the whole concept of energy. You know, when you get to that point where you trust your instinct and you learn how to flow with the process of life, then you learn how to understand energy, because the language of our universe is energy.
yes,
And if we understand that, and if we understand furthermore that we only see 20% of what reality really is represented by, then we realize how important it is to really go within and to learn how to trust your intuition and to learn how to flow with life in every aspect, and also how to learn how to become non-judgmental and and really honor and respect your fellow human being. There's so much that goes with this. I counsel a lot of people, and when you say to people, but listen, this is all energy. Money is all energy, and you have a force field, and that there are these wonderful laws that work in our universe, and not only here but everywhere else. And if you understand how that all comes together and how they work together, then you can really begin to create your own world and your own reality. And I'm specifically referring here to the law of attraction that so many people talk about, and it was made a big fuss about in The Secret, and it was in the Oprah Winfrey Show, and so on and so on. But that's only one of the laws. You have to know all the laws to know how energy really functions, so that you can contribute in a manner where you can take responsibility for everything that you do and say, and you can live meaningfully.
You used the word energy, and that's interchangeable with the word when I talk about power. We're really saying the same thing, because that's the deal. When you talk about the law of attraction, the problem for most people with the law of attraction is that it also includes that part of you that you're in denial of, and that's a big part of why people don't seem to be able to get the law of attraction working in the way they'd like to have it working, is because they've half of ourselves we just have compartmentalized over here. We don't even own it as being part of ourselves, and yet that's going to have an effect with every law, whether it's attraction or any of the other laws you're talking about.
Well, the problem with the law of attraction is that so many people have seen the law of attraction as a way to get things.
Yes.
But that is not the purpose of the law. Let me put it in simple terms, if I can, and that is that the law of attraction really says this: that a short definition is that which is likened unto itself is drawn. So if you think about how energy works and how power works, but let's call it energy because that's my terminology.
That's fine. Yeah, that's good.
So you think a thought, right? That thought is converted into an emotion, because every thought that you have generates some sort of an emotion.
Right.
Now that happens in your heart chakra. And the heart chakra, then in the heart chakra, the emotion is then sent down to the solar plexus, where the emotion is converted into a feeling. And then this is scientifically proven. The feeling then is converted into a frequency or into a vibration that leaves your body and sits around your body in what is known as a force field.
Right.
So your force field is literally comprised of your dominant thoughts, the thoughts that you think on a continuous basis. So, it's one thing to say, well, gee, if I think enough about that red Corvette, it will show up magically in my driveway. No, it won't.
No.
Because the question is, what else are you thinking?
Sure. And
Right?
when you talk about all of the thoughts, what I'm hearing you talk about is all that chatter that goes on in our mind, the negative stuff that we're feeding ourselves and feeding into that emotional body and into our force field. That until I get some kind of handle on that negative chatter, I can't really get a handle on this law. Am I right?
Well, true, absolutely true. And that is because we have in the order of 75,000 thoughts that shoot through our minds on a daily basis.
Right.
And the problem is that the majority of those thoughts, number one, are repetitive and negative, right?
Right.
So now we talk again about consciousness and awareness. Before we can get a handle on those thoughts, we have to become aware of the things that we are thinking about on a continuous basis.
Sure.
Most people are not, because they are on autopilot most of the time. So one of the key things is to learn how to become a conscious human being who has his attention and his energy and his power focused in the present moment, because that is where all your power is.
And that brings up the problem that most of us don't want to have to be responsible, especially for that many thoughts. And autopilot was invented in airplanes so that the pilot didn't have to be responsible in the moment, could be doing something else. But one way to prove the fact about the repetition and all this stuff, how many times have we gone to bed and just before we went to bed heard a song and we took it to bed? It's like for the whole evening.
Right.
When you're working with someone, what do you use to break through that barrier? Because until that happens, you just until you're able to really get through this idea of being responsible. I don't think we can have much success in coaching people or in therapy or any other thing.
Well, you actually just said the key word, and that is responsibility. I
Yes.
tell that to people. When I work with people, I say that. I say, look, I can help you figure out something, but you are responsible for your life. You have to take responsibility for every aspect of your life.
Right.
Now, but George, here's the thing. People are willing to take responsibility of aspects of their lives that they find easy.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
they can deal with.
Right.
But it's the difficult things that they won't look at. So, that's the key point in coaching and counseling people, to say, okay, I can talk to you about how to solve some of your problems, but I want you to know you are responsible. And if we can't make any progress, if you can't get to the point where you can at least say, okay, I might not know how to handle it right at this point, but yes, I am responsible. Because you see, what people do when you do counseling is they jump to the really difficult philosophical things like, well, why was I born here?
Right.
And, can you give me an answer to this? And why do I have this mother and this father? Well, if we get back to the basic information of responsibility, it means that I have what I have on my plate because I'm equipped to handle this. That's
Right.
my departure point.
Absolutely.
I am equipped to handle this. Now, let's start looking at how you react to what is happening in your life instead of looking for somebody or a person to blame.
Well, one of the things that I've found in working with people is just exactly what you're talking about, is to move them away from the why questions to the how questions. In other words, it's like not why am I here in this mess, but how in the world do I get out of it? Not why don't I have this, but how do I get this? And it's just a 180-degree and puts us in the right direction. But if I get stuck on why, I'm really in the victim place without knowing that I have a victim stance going
Oh
on.
yeah, yeah.
That
I was just going to say that, when you ask why, you really are a victim.
absolutely.
When you say how, you are looking for ways to deal with it. It's like Einstein said. He said you have two choices. You either come from the level of the problem or you come from the level of the solution.
Exactly.
The level of the problem has a completely different energy than the level of the solution. So you have to learn how to come from the level of the solution. It's that old story. Is your glass half full or is your glass half empty? And that's one of the laws. There are 6 laws that people have to know how to deal with. And the first one is the law of control.
I want to come back to the 6 laws. But we have a question in the chat room, and I don't want to get to the last minute and not get that question. Tom, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question from John in the chat room. He started out by discussing. He says, "I've been working on clearing out the noise." This is when you guys were talking about the noise in your head or the clutter in your head. And he says, "I've been working on clearing out the noise, but I still have moments where I miss the gut instinct and end up confused over facts. Then I force myself to look inward for the instinct, and by that time my head is cluttered. The question here is, how can one clear it out to feel that original instinct?"
You want to take that, Elfrida?
Yeah. When you do something like that, is you always have to look at, what is the end goal and what is the expectation. The whole idea of meditation is really not to become something, to get something, or to go somewhere, but just to be. And so, probably something that will help to clear out the clutter and the continuous talking going on in your head is to just sit down and say to yourself, relax. You have to get your body in a relaxed position. You don't have to sit in the lotus position, but just be relaxed. And then say to yourself, what I'm going to do is I am just going to be quiet for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes, I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to, and if I think anything, I'm not going to judge myself. Or I'm not going to go, oh, well, there you go, you failed again. You just, 2 minutes, just quiet. And then tomorrow, if there's a lot of chat, you do it again until you manage to quiet down for 2 minutes. And then you can make it 2.5 minutes and 3 minutes. What this is, it's a whole new way of being that you have to teach yourself. Because underlying, when you say, I cannot meditate, I can't shut out voices, is you saying, I cannot.
Absolutely.
The moment you say, I can, you will learn how to do it. If you say, I cannot, you're absolutely right. Because we are the lawmakers in our own lives.
Sure, and the other,
remember that.
yeah, absolutely, and Alfreda, the other part of that is when I make that decision, what happened was I threw a switch in that energy circuit that threw the energy into I can't, as opposed to into I can, and they're two opposites. And you really hit on what I've come to understand is a huge factor in all this, and that is when I get up against that busy mind, or that moment when things get, your stomach gets anxious and it kind of wants to shut down. Before I speak, the first thing I do is just try to pause, because that's stopping for just a little bit and asking myself a couple of questions. One is, how important is this? Really. And I found that 90, maybe even more, 90% of what I think is important really may not be. It's just I made some decision of its importance earlier. And pausing kind of helps that a bit.
Yeah. Well, an important thing that I have taught myself over the years to do is to watch my thoughts.
Right.
And sometimes when those thoughts come into my head, I say them out loud. And then when I say them out loud, I sometimes go, wow, are you crazy? You really had that thought? You know, seriously? Is that what you're thinking? But you see, that's part of the underlying, that I call it the thoughts that fly under the radar all the time.
Right.
So, I have taught myself to watch my thought process on a continuous basis. Now, is this easy? No, it's not easy. I'm not trying to say that it's easy. But if you want to become really conscious and really aware, you have to become aware of the force that helps to create your world and your reality, which is your thoughts and your enthusiasm and the emotion behind your thoughts. If you want to be really responsible for what is going on in your life, it's essential. It's absolutely essential. And the key thing is not to overwhelm yourself and say, I got to do this in a day. I got to do this in a week. No. Pick one area of your life where your mind goes crazy on you. Let's say finances, right?
Right.
Finances is a very good one.
It's a huge one,
And
especially today down here.
Absolutely. So what you do is you begin to look at the things that you think about finances and money on a continuous basis, and and just voice them out loud. When you have a crazy thought, when you have that thought of, I can't pay my mortgage, I don't know how I'm going to make my car payment, my credit card is maxed out, what am I going to do? If you have those thoughts, say them out loud, because then you have to teach your mind a different pathway. Is your glass half full or is it half empty?
See, and well, and there are two things I want to kick back. One is that any changes that have occurred in me have been on one level only, and that has been my viewpoint. What you just talked about, the glass half full or half empty. Change comes in when I change my mind, my viewpoint changes. And you were talking about the need to examine what we believe, and I want to connect that back up with what we were talking about earlier with the law of attraction, is that this vibration that you were talking about, I've come to understand is created by everything that I believe, because what I believe hooks into my emotions. And so, like what I'm attracting is a result of my total belief system, everything that I believe. And until I start breaking down into what you're saying, that one thing that's a real problem, and looking at those beliefs and changing them, I got to keep getting everything that I've been getting has to keep coming back my way, because I am magnetic. I made my own attraction. Yeah. In your workbook, do you work a lot with breaking down beliefs or finding out what you believe?
Yes, I do. But I just want to say to our listeners, when there are 6 laws that they
Yes.
which really constitute the rules of the game, and the book describes them in a lot of detail. It's the law of control.
Yes.
It's the law of belief, the law of expectation, the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction, and the law of correspondence. And all 6 these laws work together. You cannot only focus on the law of attraction. You'll
Right.
never get what you want,
Right.
if that's what you were taught to do. But to answer your question about the law of belief, the law of belief is the law that sets the bar.
Right.
That determines how high will you jump, how high will you go, and what will you accomplish. And that is not determined by God. It's not determined by an outside family member. It's not a friend. It's not luck. It's not good luck. It's not bad luck. It's not fate. It's you. You say, this is what I am capable of. Because in each one of our own lives, we lay down the law. We are the lawmakers. And that's part of the whole thing of learning how to stop struggling and really beginning to live. Once we really comprehend that power is internal and that I can learn how to access it if I just understand a few things, then you're on your way. These victories that I'm talking about that we are capable of, they come in small steps. You do one small thing, and then you learn another thing, and another thing. And every time that you have a victory, it is experience under the belt that nobody can ever take away from you.
Absolutely, and experience really leads us into that energy that's usable to us, the power to be able to use that energy. I before we go any more, what I'd like to do is your book's available on Amazon. It's available at Barnes and Noble, and is it on the shelves yet, or is it through internet at this point?
It's on all the major websites.
Right.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Do you sell the book on your own website?
I do.
Well, tell us what that website is, because that's the best. If you're thinking about buying this book, Stop Struggling and Start Living, boy, and I tell you what, it's a really great story that makes these things that we're talking about understandable, easy, and more importantly, doable. So, tell us your website, Elfrida.
My website is just my name. It's elfridapretorius.com. And they can get the book from my website, but it's probably easier to get it from Amazon.
Is it?
I mean, it's up to the individuals of what they want to do. It doesn't matter to me either way, whether they come to my website or whether they go to Amazon.com. I just would like people to know how important it is that we. It's not necessary to struggle as hard as we do. Life does not have to be that hard. And, we can learn how to take control, and we can learn how to figure out things for ourselves. But do you know what the big thing is, though, George? We have to care.
Oh, absolutely.
It has to be important. It has to be important enough to want to do it.
Yeah, but you know what, Elfrida? You hit on something that's really a huge factor in our drug culture these days. Like this idea of caring. People think they have all kinds of reasons for getting into drugs or drinking too much alcohol or doing what they do. But at the root of that, it's to find a few moments where you just don't care, trying to escape responsibility and the need to care.
Right.
That's what getting high is all about, and it will either lead us to God at some point or to perdition, one or the other. It seems to have that kind of. Listen, we got about 3 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is there was no way we're going to be able to talk about everything that's in the book. Sam is a good teacher in his journey. Have you got something that we've missed that you would really like to leave our audience with? Anything we didn't talk about?
No, we talked about quite a bit.
Well, we did.
It's impossible for me to single out something in the book. One of the probably the most important thing that people have to learn is to learn how to become response able. Because when you become response able, it means that you learn how to choose your responses. And when you learn how to choose your responses, you really put yourself back in the driver's seat.
Well, there's one other word that you use in this idea of responsible, and I think this is a really important word, and that's understanding forgiveness and how it really begins to set us free.
Yeah.
If we can't get down to forgiveness, we're going to be stuck with it, whatever we have. Whatever resentment, regret, or whatever it might be. And that could be with ourselves or with others.
Well, right. I mean, and forgiveness is really why there are so many victims in this world, or the lack of forgiveness, I should say.
Right, lack of forgiveness.
The lack of forgiveness is, we hold people responsible for our heartaches, our disappointments, everything that didn't go right in our lives. There's always somebody who is responsible for the fact that I am not in the perfect place that I wanted to be.
Right.
But, when we learn how to, first of all, when we learn how to take responsibility and we then learn how to forgive, the wonderful thing about forgiveness is that you are the one who's set free.
Absolutely.
When I was many, many years younger, I used to carry grudges, and I used to be upset for really long periods of time. But I've taught myself not to do that.
It's like taking poison, isn't it?
Yeah, it is like taking poison,
Yeah.
when you carry a grudge. So, I have a rule. If I'm upset, I will say, hey, George, you really made me mad. And I'm upset with you, and I'll tell you why. And then we can have a discussion, but whether you agree with me or not, I'm still going to forgive you. I forgive you straight away because I want to go to bed tonight to sleep.
I don't want to hit myself in the head with I don't want to hit myself ahead with a hammer because you've done something to harm me, right? It's the insanity. Listen, Elfrida, we are totally out of time. You and I could talk, I know, for another couple of hours without any problem whatsoever. We definitely didn't cover the territory your book covers, so we'll have to do this again. But I appreciate you taking an hour out of your time tonight and spending it with us, and I'll look forward to some kind of future meeting with you.
Thank you very much, George, for having me on your show.
Thank you, and you have a good night, Elfrida. Bye-bye.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Well, we have I have totally enjoyed this evening with Elfrida. She is a wonderful she's a wonderful writer, and her storytelling abilities will just really grab a hold of you and bring you into the book. And at the same time, while you're enjoying the story, you'll learn how to begin to work some of these principles, some of these laws in your life that Elfrida was talking about. So don't forget, next week we have Reclaiming the Goddess Sexuality with Linda Savage. It's going to be a great show. Be sure and come back. We're out of time, so be sure and come back next week. And in the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.